So I think I have been procrastinating on this video for way too long, and I'm doing it now. Okay, I'm bringing this video to life, and hopefully I get some I do something about this procrastination. So the other day I was scrolling through a WhatsApp group. Okay, it had like 15 people around it, and the reason why I was scrolling through the members of that WhatsApp group was simply because I wanted to find a member in that WhatsApp group who had the least intimidating face, so I could ask that person what was going on in my internship, which I had missed for the past few days. And while scrolling through, I noticed something. And after noticing that, I felt so uneasy that hence this became literally my inspiration for this video. What felt off was that every single person had the same exact pose in their pictures. Like, I'm not exaggerating. It was the same angle, it was the same mirror pose. The photos were of different people, of course. It was in different rooms. It was a different type of lighting. But if I had stacked all those photos on top of each other, the silhouette of all of those images would have matched entirely. And at first I just laughed it off, but after a while I was genuinely unsettled. Not I'm not talking in a very dramatic way, because when I showed the same observation to my parents, they also brought up the same thing, that from their eyes everybody has been dressing the same. They have been expressing their concerns, their talking style, how they talk, how they express themselves in a very oddly same manner. When did that happen and why is it so? And yeah, that's exactly as I said the video is about. Okay, why don't we talk about mirror selfies? So, what's interesting about a mirror selfie is that by design, it's supposed to be you, just you in your own space, captured in a way where you are not really caring about how you look, but also in a very fashionable way you can show yourself, you can express yourself how you want to be seen. And there is not a photographer in the scene, there is no sense of direction. You are your creative control, you can do whatever you want to. And yet somehow we all landed in the same place. So there is actually a word for what I saw in that WhatsApp group the other day. Researchers call this a descriptive norm conformity. Basically what it says, that when enough people around you do something, your brain quietly files it under as a so this is what people do, not because anybody told you to do that or instructed you to do that, not because you consciously copied that. It was just because you simply saw it enough number of times, of course, and your sense of normal quietly shifted before you even noticing that. The thing is, this isn't new. Humans have always done this. We are social creatures after all. We look around and we calibrate the same exact way. But something else has changed in that process. The speed of how it happened earlier versus now. has completely shifted the whole narrative. Why don't we do this small exercise, okay? Think about the time you first saw that mirror pose. Maybe in a reel or an Instagram post, or maybe you saw your friend doing it somewhere, or maybe you saw that trendy viral makeup look that everybody has been doing. Um, Nowadays, it's the low effort, no makeup look trend nowadays, right? Or maybe it was a particular kind of laughing of how Instagram influencers talk in a certain way, or maybe there are so many reels explaining that as well. These hookup poses, these poses where they do certain things and suddenly you're hooked, suddenly you're watching the whole reel. And now you're seeing this uncanny pattern where every single person is doing that.
My name's Haley, and this is day one of being an influencer. Hey guys, it's Haley, and this is day two of being an influencer. Hey, what's up, guys? It's Haley, and this is day three of being an influencer. Good morning, guys. It's Haley, and it is day four of being an influencer. Hey, you guys, I am running so late, so get ready with me for day 5 of being an influencer.
Probably didn't see it just once and called it a day. You saw it like 19 times in a week from 19 different people because an algorithm decided it was worth it. Engagement was up on one hand, the watch time was increasing on the other hand. So yeah, what the algorithm decided? Push it, push it, push it. Instagram's For You page algorithm amplifies the type of content that mimics viral trends or the leading creators who have to conform in hopes of visibility, which ends up disincentivizing originality entirely. And that is the quiet trap, right? Nobody is telling you to do a mirror pose. Nobody is sitting somewhere and saying, I need to conform now. They just see what gets attention and they try to do that, and then it gets attention, and then the loop keeps on continuing forever. The algorithm doesn't reward weird, and I need you to think about this. It rewards a familiar weird, the version of unique that is just different enough to feel fresh but not so strange that it breaks your scroll and it tells you to close the app and do your own weird. It doesn't. Social media has birthed the rapidly changing microtrends, which I can make a whole video about, with constant new fixations dominating our feeds. Our personal tastes are being governed by these fast moving algorithms, and then in turn, it drives us to kill individuality itself with overconsumption. And the thing that blows my mind is we are aware, we know that this is happening. This is not a new thing I'm talking about. You might have noticed it as well. Most social media users could tell you honestly that their feed molds their self expression. And yet, there is this mirror selfie, there is this same pose, and there is this 15 people, and there is this one WhatsApp group. Okay, let's pause here for a second because I want to be fair here. Because if I don't do that, someone in the comments was going to say, this is just culture, it's always been like this, and people have copied clothes, for example, all the time in the name of inspo. And yes, you are right in there. Every generation had its own version of the thing everybody was doing ages ago. The puff hairstyle in 2016, or the English music trend where suddenly everybody was listening to Justin Bieber, Ed Sheeran, or Alan Walker. At some point of time, there was this pandemic K-pop fan base which was turning global, or everybody having that itch to cut their bangs all of a sudden. These are the things that I personally cannot explain. Copying is how culture moves, and imitation is how people learn in their own ways. Fashion, art, be it music, every major creative movement was built on someone looking at something and was going on, hey, this looks cool, I want to do that, and then doing it in their own way. But here's the catch, doing it in their own way, but slightly differently, and that's the thing. Eventually, that slightly different thing becomes the next reference point. Picasso, who is not exactly a figure I want to morally defend, but the quote stands that good artists copy and great artists steal. The idea being copying is just surface level copying. Stealing is absorbing something so deeply that it finally becomes yours. And yeah, that's what separates trend following from actual influence. Asha Bhosle, for example, she took this modern Western pop that was being so popular back in the days in the Hollywood industry and brought it into the Indian market with songs like the Marudam, still one of my faves till this day. The same happens with writers, the same happens with filmmakers. Inspiration is a feature, it shouldn't be seen as a bug which kills individualism. But the difference should be, and that's the thing I keep coming back to, is awareness. The awareness to know the difference. Did you see the pose and think, I like that, and let me try to make it mine? Or did you just seep in and you just started doing it without actually realizing that you are doing nothing and adding your own impulse and just copying what you just saw online? Now add AI onto this debate. Suddenly the conformity problem gets a bit more existential. Large language models are designed to rely on probability distributions, so their output tends to lack any kind of novelty or any kind of surprise, because whatever output they are giving us is something that has already been written somewhere or already has existed in the world somewhere or at some point of time. These models are fundamentally trained to conform to existing data distribution, biased, and it's pretty terrible if you think it like that, towards, it's biased towards, some kind of predominant cultural notions, meaning they can exclude a variety of unique perspectives from different people. In plain terms, AI is by its nature and an averaging machine, if I may. It was trained on everything humans have made, so when it generates, be it a photo, a text, an idea, it generates the most statistically likely version of that thing, which is kind of opposite of original. And there is now an actual research on what happens when people use AI for creative work. Although generative AI helps individuals perform better in creative tasks, that creativity that we are talking about, it drops remarkably upon withdrawal of AI assistance. Researchers describe this as a creative scar. The idea that your individual creativity actually gets damaged by over reliance of AI tools. So it's not just AI tools look the same, it's just that AI usage, even when it makes our work objectively better, might be quietly atrophying your ability that makes something specifically yours. And this is where universities are frankly fumbling. Institutions still don't have coherent policies on AI use in terms of creative and academic work. The conversation is mostly, should students be allowed to use it, rather than what does it mean for a student's relationship with their own creative voice if they outsource thinking from the age of 18. Nobody is asking that question loud enough. We are entering into a society where AI is going to enter our workforce someday or the other. So if we are not implementing it in universities, how can we expect the future workforce to perform better in AI? I want to tell you about my journal ecosystem because I think this is quite relevant to this video. So I have three of them. Let me show you one by one. It's my personal diary where I keep track of my feelings or maybe some event that has shaped my worldview, or maybe some personal opinions, preferences, or if I just want to think on paper. This is also a junk journal, and yeah, most of them are just personal entries. I think many people call it a personal diary, many people call it a personal journal. It's something I do not have any kind of structure, and I just write it whenever I feel like it. There is no schedule, there is no prompts. Sometimes I use prompts, but most of the time I don't. I just use my free consciousness. It's just consciousness flowing in paper. The second notebook that I want to talk about is my media journal. The second book that I want to talk about is my media journal. So this notebook is solely for me to keep a record of all types of media that I'm watching. So mainly I keep a track of the movies or K-dramas or anime or any kind of series that I'm watching, and I basically write them what I thought about it. I also read a lot of novels, a lot of books, so I also keep a track of what I thought about it. And yeah, that's my media journal. So basically, it helps me to just write my thoughts instead of being influenced by what the other people are talking about the same media. I first write down whatever I'm thinking. It can be just two lines, like I like this movie so much because of this event or this character, or maybe I like the actor or actress there. Simply writing these, it does not even have a ranking system. I just like whatever rankings I put on. But what it makes me do, it makes me critically analyze the media that I'm watching. I always find two good or two bad points about that movie, and yeah, it helps me critically analyze about what are the things that I'm watching. The third notebook, which is one of my favorites, is my commonplace notebook. So it started as I started doing this from last year, where I started to write whatever things that I come across in on a daily basis, and I just write that down. Mainly, this notebook contains all of the YouTube videos that I consume. I know it's a bit different from my media journal, but I keep a track of all my YouTube videos, or maybe anything that I come across while I'm taking a walk outside, or maybe I'm talking to someone and an interesting topic comes up. So this is literally commonplacing. It is a practice that is not new, it's not something that I invented. It's something that has been going for centuries, where you collect things that resonate with you. A lot of famous people like Darwin, John Locke, they have been keeping a commonplace notebook with them at all times and keeping a track of their thought process or how they felt after consuming some kind of media or some kind of books, newspapers. It can be a quote, it can be an idea that you feel maybe while watching my YouTube videos, maybe something you resonated with. This ecosystem that I've built collectively are the most me thing that I own. It's not my social media, not even this channel, these notebooks, which nobody will probably ever read. This is where my actual thinking happens. And there is no algorithm in my notebook. There is no this format will perform well, or you have to follow this kind of conformity and you will be successful. There is no hindrance, there is no good or bad thing here. I wonder sometimes if the reason originality feels so rare right now is because how we have replaced the thinking stage with posting stage. We see something, and instead of sitting with it until it becomes ours, we just share it. We just write a LinkedIn post, or we just share in our Instagram stories, or recreate it before it even gets digested and we critically analyze as to what it actually means. I don't think the problem is influence. I don't think the problem is even trends. I think the problem, the real problem, is not knowing which is which. Not knowing whether the way you're posing in a photo is something you actually chose to do or something you watched a hundred and millions of times until it became invisible to you. Not knowing whether the essay you wrote is yours or it is a smoothened AI assisted version that sounds literally like everyone. Not knowing whether your taste is really yours or it's a mood board that your algorithm has assembled for you over these years. The mirror selfie bothered me not because everyone looked the exact same way, but because I genuinely don't think most of these people know that they look the same. Nobody in that WhatsApp group woke up one day and they decided that they were just trying to be identical. They each had their own thought process and they were just being themselves in their own way. But when all of these people were brought together in that WhatsApp group, the whole narrative changed. Research suggests that social media users tend to conform to popular interests and likes, resulting in a loss of individuality, not through force but through the gradual, invisible pressure of seeing what others are doing and absorbing it as a default system. The real valid question would be, should I just avoid all trends? That's not the right question. The question is, do you know, like actually know why you made that choice? Can you trace it back to yourself? Can you trace that choice back and connect it to something that you genuinely wanted to say, or are you just reflecting the mirror? Get a notebook, not to be aesthetic about it, not to be a journaling kind of person. Just write things down before you know what you think about them. Collect these thoughts, collect these ideas without knowing why yet. Rate a movie badly, If you know that thought was bad, even if everybody else liked it, that is still being you. That is still being your own original thought coming from your own brain. Knowing your actual reaction before you see that discourse, before you see that this is how all of the other people are thinking, that's the thing. That's where you live. And that's where we are in a moment right now where that is genuinely harder than ever it has been. The noise is louder, the algorithms are faster, and the averaging machine is just being better than it's ever been. But here's the thing, and this might be the most optimistic thing that I'll say: the weirder your notebook is, the better. The more it looks like nothing you would ever post, the better. Because that's the raw material, that's your raw emotions, and that's the thing that when you eventually do make something, maybe it might be a video, a painting, a poem, or maybe a pose in the mirror, it comes from somewhere specific. You have a reason to be doing that. Somewhere that is specifically you. And trust me, people can always tell the difference, even if they cannot explain the why part. Even if the WhatsApp with a random 15 people with the same display picture, you are the one who is noticing that.